Teresa Paiva Weed é Presidente do Senado do Estado de Rhode Island, onde 8,7% dos seus habitantes têm raízes portuguesas. Rhode Island é um dos estados norte-americanos com menor população. Pouco mais de 1 milhão de pessoas vivem rodeadas pelo mar e pelos estados de Massachusetts e Connecticut. Apesar desta pequena população, Rhode Island é o segundo estado com maior densidade populacional dos Estados Unidos. Nativa de Newport, a segunda maior cidade do estado oceano, Teresa Paiva Weed, antes de chegar ao posto máximo neste Senado, ocupou vários cargos públicos, quer estaduais como também locais, mas foi em 2009 que se tornou Presidente do Senado de Rhode Island. Sejam bem-vindos a mais uma edição deste programa. Hoje estamos em Providence, na capital do estado de Rhode Island, e a nossa convidada é a Presidente do Senado, Teresa Paiva Weed. Teresa, thank you very much for having us here. How do you feel about being the first woman president of the Rhode Island Senate?
Well, welcome to Rhode Island, and thank you for taking the time to come here to our beautiful state for this interview. I'm very honored that my colleagues have given me the opportunity to serve in the role as the first woman president of the Senate in Rhode Island. It's very important to know that while I'm the first one to occupy this position, that there have been many very effective, strong women leaders who came before me, serving as chairs of committee in order to blaze the trail to make it possible for someone like me to be able to hold this position.
Now, as a female in command, do you make special efforts to attract more women to politics?
I believe that I have, particularly with the younger women, put some extra energy into ensuring that I'm out in the community, that people are aware of not just myself, but the other women in the Senate. We have a unique situation in the Senate in that we have a number of senior women who are in leadership roles. So the opportunity often presents itself. For example, if I can't be there, Senator Sosnowski, who's the chair of the Environment Committee, may go and speak to a women's group, or Senator Perry, who's chair of the Health Education. I also have my majority whip, who is a woman. So while we're not as strong in numbers as the men, the women that are in the Senate have key leadership roles.
Do you think that for women is more difficult to get into politics?
I believe that over time we've seen some changes, but that there is still a barrier there, a glass ceiling, when it comes to state level and federal level elected positions. We're seeing more and more women on the local level at our school committees and our city councils, but we're not yet seeing them break the glass ceiling with regard to the higher offices.
And why do you think that there are not more women in the politics? What are the reasons?
I think many of them are still cultural. For example, in the case of the Rhode Island Senate and House, we meet at 4 o'clock every day. And there are a lot of women who find themselves in the role of being the primary caretaker of children. And no matter how you look at it, if you're in this building at 4 o'clock, you're going to lose between 3 and 5:30, 6 o'clock. So I think that is part of it, the cultural difference. I still see a difference in terms of women raising money and men raising money. There is still
there's a gap.
There's a gap still. It's still harder for women politicians, against their nature to some extent, to go out there and raise the money. And as you know, in government, at the federal level, the state level, the local level, but particularly the higher you go in office, the more important it is to have the money to fund campaigns.
How was your personal journey leading up to this point? Have you always wanted to be a politician?
I always wanted to be in government. I don't necessarily think that
right?
I always wanted to be a politician. I've always loved government ever since I was young. I went to law school and became an attorney, but during the time I was in college, I served as a page here at the State House, and really was smitten, I think, as many are, with the love of the legislative process. I had the opportunity when I came home from law school to run for office, and I've had a tremendous number of people who've encouraged me along the way to continue in politics and believe that without those people, I wouldn't have been able to reach the position I hold today.
You had many awards in your career, and some, I guess most of them, somehow resulted from social issues. Is that important for you?
It's very important to me, and it's probably the thing that's the hardest for me now that I'm in this position, because oftentimes the business community would be skeptical of somebody who had in fact really displayed most of their career or commitment in their career to human services.
So they are not open for that?
I think that they've come a long way, but I think oftentimes, unfortunately, because I don't believe it's true, a lot of times people see it as an either or. I don't believe it's an either or. I believe that it's, in order for us to be a healthy society, we need to ensure that all aspects of society are healthy. But in the competition for difficult funds, particularly during these difficult economic times, unfortunately, we find ourselves too often talking about tax breaks or tax increases versus funding certain human services programs. The other side of that—
So it's kind of off topic usually?
It's kind of hard. They compete. And the other thing is, though, there were years, many, many years, when the human services folks were able to get by just saying, this is for the good of the people. And in the last 10 years, 10 to 15 years, human services agencies have had to become more efficient, more accountable. And they have. They've responded to that and are making better use of their resources.
But they are doing that better use from the resources because of the economy? Or because there was some pressure to do that?
A combination. I think there's been a real focus on both government, on human services, and in the business world to downsize with technology and to become more efficient. But the reality is, if you have 3 agencies that are all doing very similar, performing very similar functions as services, and the legislature or the federal government is cutting the funding, it's important that those agencies continue to be able to provide funding for the services and not simply for salaries for people to administer the programs. So those agencies, I've been very proud of, so many of them have come together and collaborated and coordinated and eliminated positions through attrition and have, for example, in Rhode Island, the entire East Bay in the area of human services, we have they've all come together where there were all these different smaller agencies. We have what's called CAP agencies now.
So is it a new agency? How that works?
It's a merger of all the other agencies.
To turn it more efficient?
To make it more efficient, and they can buy technology together, they can reduce have savings and buyings and reduce personnel through attrition over time.
So now they work like a company.
Not quite, but a little bit more efficient.
In the sense that since they merge, they have more power to do buyings, as you said.
Exactly, and instead of having one small profit, for example, in Newport, you have a nonprofit that embraces East Providence to Newport, EBCAP, and they are able to work far more efficiently. And with transportation and people being more mobile, people oftentimes live in one city and work in another. It's not as it was many years ago where people all lived and worked in the same community.
One of the biggest problems affecting Rhode Island is the lack of jobs. Like in Portugal, you have a very high unemployment rate. What steps are you taking to create more jobs?
For Rhode Island, it's been a very difficult transition, very similar to the state of Michigan, because we had been so entrenched for so long in a manufacturing economy. And we also had high employment in the construction industry. This particular recession has hit the construction industry in particular very, very hard, because so much of it was at least triggered in no small part from the events that occurred in the housing market. What we have been doing as a Senate is a three-pronged plan that has included decreasing regulation, attempting to get the message out to our small businesses and our big businesses that we are working with them here in Rhode Island and we want to make it easy for them to do business. Trying to improve access to capital for our small and larger businesses through a variety of different means, because once again, the banks, in light of the economic, really tightened up their lending after, I might say after the horse was out of the barn, but they did,
Yeah.
and making it very hard for some of our smaller businesses to be able to secure capital. So we've enacted some programs to address that. And finally, the one issue that is been the most difficult, but I think the most important to embrace, has been workforce development and training of our employees in recognition that the economy has changed and the demand in the workplace is for skills different than what many of our citizens and residents of our state have.
So you are kind of requalificate the workforce here in Rhode Island?
That is what we are attempting to work with the governor's office and do. There are Department of Labor and Training, together with our higher education system, as well as our Department of our Economic Development Corporation, have certain guidelines that were set forth in a program that the speaker and I worked on together, the 21st Century Workforce Development Program, which outlines a path, if you may, by which we can better use our federal dollars and our state dollars to provide job opportunities. At one point, at different points, we hear there's all these people unemployed and that there's jobs, but there's no match because the skill sets don't match. One of the things that we've promoted in the Senate is finding where there's similarity in skill sets, helping to retrain those folks and make them, provide opportunities for them to get back to work.
That's why you said that bringing down the unemployment numbers was a Senate priority, because the problem is that huge?
The problem is that huge, and it is, our numbers, our unemployment numbers at 11.1 are unacceptable, and it is, not only is it a priority, it is our highest priority, is to increase the number of jobs in our state, improve the state's image as a business-friendly state, and move Rhode Island forward out of this economic recession.
Here, the largest employer is precisely the state of Rhode Island. And Portugal is known to have also a lot of people working in the public sector. My question is trying to understand how you have been dealing with this problem or this situation.
Over the last 10 years, we have significantly reduced the number of employees, we call them full-time employee FTEs, in the state. So the first step is we have significantly reduced the workforce. In some cases, maybe too much so. The second thing that we have done is many more public-private partnerships, and I mentioned the human services previously. That's perhaps an area where we've seen it the most over the last 10 to 20 years, where before you used to have certain services provided in the human service field directly by government. Now we rely very much on our nonprofit community to provide those same services, and we really simply pay for those services and manage those services from the state point of view.
Opposing to the past that you have your own employees doing that job.
Very much so. One area where you see that specifically was in the area of the developmentally disabled, where folks were hospitalized not that long ago, and then what happened over time is it was better policy for people to be able to live in the community and live independently. But what the state did, while we still have some involvement in some group homes, really we rely on the not-for-profit agencies around the state to administer, manage, and work with folks in our group homes.
Which is a different strategy to face this problem.
It is, and you still need to be able to regulate it and supervise it because we're talking about, in this particular instance, the most vulnerable members of our society. In other areas, you've seen it in an interesting way, for example, with the registry of motor vehicles. Now you can register your car at what we call AAA, our American Automobile Association. So in that way,
instead of being like a public facility, you are giving
able
that
to go. You have an alternative. We still have the public facility. And then the final thing I think has been technology and more efficiencies through technology that have enabled the reduction of employees in many areas around the state, whether particularly see that in different areas where it was the area of collections or different things like that, that now with technology, people paying things online, things have been streamlined and are more efficient.
What about the negotiation with the unions? Did you have lots of headaches dealing with them?
Ultimately, the governor's responsible for the direct negotiations with the unions, and they vary union to union, but my experience has been that the union leadership and the employees want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. That being said, do they oftentimes feel that more is asked of them than is asked of other sectors of government? Or would they advocate that perhaps we should tax differently or that our policies are more favorable to the wealthy than the working people? Of course they do, as they should. So my experience has been they want to be part of the solution.
They are open to discuss this kind of points.
When we passed a piece of legislation about 5 years ago, a privatization bill, what the union asked for was the opportunity to compete. So before any government service was made private, and I'm oversimplifying it a little, but the bottom line is they wanted the opportunity to demonstrate that as a unionized workforce, they could perform that service as inexpensively efficiently as the private sector. And in a number of cases, when the government has taken the steps required under the legislation that we passed, that in fact the unions have sharpened their pencils, they've been able to demonstrate that the service and the efficiency have become improved and the service was not let to the private sector.
So I see you have a very good relationship with the unions. And there was any civil society protests or demonstrations? Did you face that or?
Oh yes, I mean we don't always agree. We recently, as you may be aware, did pension reform. Certainly there were a number of protest rallies and much opposition to those reforms. And that being said, I understand and respect those that advocate for the union membership. While at the end of the day, I may make a decision or cast a vote that they don't support. What my commitment has always been is to listen to what they say, because oftentimes, and in the case of pension reform, it was a perfect example, we can make it better based upon what they say.
Speaking about the public pension system, what went wrong? I mean, there were bad decisions made. Was a poor design of the public pension system? Was or probably due to the demographic changings that also affects a lot this.
I was going to say that what we experienced in Rhode Island is being experienced around the country and actually throughout the world. Our pension benefits were somewhat generous, our defined benefit, but that being said, not all state and government employees had Social Security. Government had made a decision not to have that leg of the stool as part of the retirement package. Several things happened. The demographics that you mentioned, we've seen around the world. The first thing is, the good news is people are living longer. The bad news is that people are living longer. And because they're living longer, those actuarial assumptions that were in place at the time that the retirement programs were originally designed now are being changed, which has created underfunded pension liability, which is unpredictable at best. The second thing that happened, though, I think has also happened around the world, and that is the market crashed. The market is down. Now, the market may come back and some of these numbers may improve, but you can't plan today
what's going to happen in the near future.
You have to assume the picture as we see it now in the market. If things improve, I, among others, hope and plan in the way we've made the changes in the system, envision that we're going to share those improvements with the employees. It's a market-based COLA that, in fact, we adopted, our cost of living adjustment, which will reflect when the market does well, that the employees would share in that. But unfortunately, if we're going to be able to continue to make a promise to employees that there is going to be a retirement system in place for them when they retire, we can't assume that the market's going to change as we go forward and design the system.
That's why you increased the retirement age?
That is why we increased the retirement age. I will say personally, if I was in a vacuum, I do wish it was a little lower, but right now it was essential that that age triggered the actuarial assumptions that were necessary to reach the 60% funding level that all of the investors in the markets said was essential to ensure the financial viability of the pension system, as well as that is considered by Moody's and other rating agencies when they're evaluating the overall economic well-being of the state.
Rhode Island is a very small state and a small economy, of course, and they are ruled by the rest of the U.S. economy. Same situation or a very similar situation happens in Portugal because we are a small economy within the European Union. How do you work with these restrictions?
It is perhaps the most challenging thing for Rhode Island, that so much of what happens in our economy is dictated not just by our neighboring state, but what goes on around the country. I believe what we've done in terms of developing our programs and our legislation is we look to our neighboring states for cooperation.
Partnerships?
Not as much as we should. There's still the competition between states, but certainly for programmatic themes as we move forward. You will see oftentimes some of the same programs in Mass or some of the same markets that you see in Rhode Island. Much of our tax policy plays off one another. On the national level, what has been healthy for us since this current administration has been there's a number of federal programs, particularly in the area of education, that Rhode Island has been able to compete for successfully and win funding for programs such as Race to the Top.
You have very good universities here. You have
excellent
Brown
universities.
University. You have the School of Arts, very famous as well. That is a way to attract more people to Rhode Island?
Absolutely, and we see our future in Rhode Island, the Knowledge District in downtown Providence. We have a very strong tourism industry here in Rhode Island. Certainly, I like to brag about my own home city of Newport, as beautiful as it is. And we have a very strong defense industry in our state as well. Combining that with our healthcare, business, and the universities which we have, I believe that we have a very bright future as a state now that we are adapting our policies to encourage and incentivize growth in those areas.
What Portugal, as a country struggling with very, very similar problems, could learn from your experience? Because you start before us, so.
I think the one area where we've been focusing is the area of education and training, and it's the area where we still have a lot to do, but I would imagine for Portugal it's the same, to determine what the new economy demands, and are we educating our youth the way They need to be educated to be prepared to come out into the 21st century. Are we still educating them with English and philosophy alone that, quite frankly, just aren't marketable in today's economy? It used to be you could send your child off to college, they got a college degree, they could get a job, write their ticket anywhere. Today's world, that's no longer true. Whether you're in Rhode Island, California, or Portugal, you need to have a degree. I think a broad-based firm, broad foundation in the arts or liberal arts is always very important, but you also, I believe, need to have specific job training that prepares you to go out into the marketplace.
So you have to bring the business to the universities, to the schools, to tell them what kind of workforce they need.
Absolutely. You can no longer, the colleges used to be able to sit and just put out degrees. It didn't matter. Everybody went, you could get a sociology degree. There's nothing more frustrating for a family than to have made all those sacrifices to send somebody to college, for them to graduate, and not to be able to get a job. And it's our responsibility to ensure that our institutions of higher education that are funded by the government are making those adjustments in curriculum that are necessary today to address that concern.
Speaking about the education, right now speaking a foreigner language is a very important asset. And Portuguese is somehow becoming a key language. How do you see the bilingual programs like the ones they have in Miami, where Portuguese is taught side by side with English or any other language?
I think we at the Portuguese community in recent years have promoted the role of the Portuguese language more and more. We've recently at the Rhode Island College developed the Institute for Portuguese Studies. But it is an issue that we need to advocate for. So often when the first Portuguese immigrants came to this country, there was a desire, as with many immigrant groups, to actually blend in and desperately no demand or request.
Kind of forget their roots?
And I think forget. I was lucky enough to go to a Portuguese school that taught Portuguese 1 through 8, and I belonged to a Portuguese parish. But other than that, people did try, many, and once again, not just the Portuguese, for many, that was the culture of the time. More recently arrived immigrants, I think, are preserving their culture while assimilating into the American society. And so for those of Portuguese descent, I think we see an opportunity to promote our heritage and ensure assimilation as well.
And how is the situation right now? Do you have schools or universities with the Portuguese programs?
I'm not familiar how many schools, how many of the universities teach Portuguese or what levels, but Rhode Island College is a state college, and once again, we do have the Institute for Portuguese Cultural Studies, and it is doing a tremendous job of promoting. And we have a unique situation right now in Rhode Island, and I do want to just kind of mention it, where the chair of the Finance Committee for the Senate is Senator Daniel DuPont, and the chair of the Finance Committee for the House is Representative Helio Melo. One can tell from those names that they are both of Portuguese descent,
Portuguese Americans,
and they both are bilingual. So if anyone is conscientious in promoting the Portuguese
language. So we can see
language,
how important the
certainly,
bilingual...
I have two very important reminders right here in the building.
Mm-hmm. With Portuguese language, we end this interview. Muito obrigado por nos ter concedido esta entrevista.
Muito obrigada.
Marcamos encontro consigo para mais uma entrevista com um luso-americano de sucesso.
Vai a Portugal e precisa de carro? A Portugal Auto Rentals é a sua solução. Visite-nos e faça a sua reserva através da nossa página na internet www.portugal-auto-rentals.com.
Espírito Santo Inc. tem mais de 140 anos de experiência. Sinónimo de solidez e segurança. As suas transferências bancárias são grátis e rápidas. Espírito Santo Inc. Eficiência ao serviço das comunidades.
Há 30 anos a dar forma a Washington, D.C. Tavares Concrete, a escolha de quem quer rigor e eficácia na construção.